Hello everybody, I'm Melissa from Meditative Astrology. Today we're going to walk through the astrology of June 14th through 20th. We have a beautiful Gemini New Moon that is coming through. Venus has several aspects that she is making just after entering the sign of Leo. So we're going to talk about all of that goodness. Before we do, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that way you don't miss anything that we have going on here. These weekly videos, they come out every Saturday morning so that way you can sit with them ahead of the upcoming week and contemplate the astrology that is going on. On Sunday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a live astrologically guided meditation right here on the YouTube channel, which is really meant to take the astrology, take the transits, take your contemplations from the weekly video, and then bring it to that quiet contemplative space where we start by talking about the energies, we lean into them maybe in a specific way through the weekly intention that's released on social media, and then we come to that quiet contemplative space, which really the goal is to give you the space and the time and the energy to create and cultivate personal relationships with the astrology. These transits are above all of us, but we all have different situations, different lives, different birth charts. So they're interacting with all of us in archetypally similar ways, but they're playing out in different areas of our lives. And there are a multitude of ways that the astrology can play out. So when we really bring it down to that personal level, it's kind of like giving yourself your own mini reading in a certain way. And you don't have to know any specifics about astrology or any of the rules or even feel like you know how to give an astrological reading. It's that contemplation, it's the listening, it's the creating relationships. It really brings in lots of goodness. So let's get together on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. That's where other announcements and posts and things like that are shared. There's a weekly intention that goes along with the meditations every Sunday. Those are all shared on social media. So let's interact on all of the things and walk the astrological journey together if you so choose to. All right, let's get right into this week here, shall we? We start out right away on Sunday, June 14th with that Gemini New Moon coming through later on in the evening, just before 11 p.m. Eastern Time. So depending on your time zone, it may be late Sunday night into early Monday morning. But this new moon that is coming through here in the sign of Gemini is the first new moon that we've had since Uranus has ingressed into the sign of Gemini for good. So there's some potential for some real initiations and to really see some opening and some innovative and creative energy flowing, which we already tend to see in the sign of Gemini. But Uranus is there for the next 7 years. And Uranus, wherever Gemini falls within our chart, is going to be opening something. That's going to be showing us new ways of doing things. And it's going to be revolutionizing different areas of our lives. Again, that depends on our own birth chart. So it's different for each and every one of us. You might really start to see that within this lunar cycle. In addition to Uranus being here and bringing some extra fresh energy to the Gemini area of our chart, this is the lunar cycle where Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is going to retrograde in the sign of Cancer. At the time of the full moon that's going to come through in a couple weeks in the sign of Capricorn, Mercury will be stationing at that moment. The new full moon that comes through is the day before Jupiter moves from Cancer into Leo. Venus just moved from Cancer into Leo. So there's a lot of shifting and there's a lot of changing and there's a lot of indication of revising and bringing in fresh energy throughout this lunar cycle, specifically at the beginning, at the outset, at this new moon. And again, Gemini is a sign that likes to bring fresh things in. It likes to consider new things. It likes to learn. It likes to be curious, right? Gemini is very curious and it asks questions. Gemini also considers oppositions in different ways, dualities, and how polarities exist. There's multiple possibilities in the sign of Gemini. There's new communications coming through. There's new understandings and new ways of creating thought processes within our head and different ways of describing things, especially with Uranus being there. I'm thinking about the multiple possibilities and dualities and polarities and how different things can be so separate from each other, yet they can coexist within different ways. I'm thinking about different things like, you know, I can feel empty in a certain way, but I can feel full in a certain way, right? There's different ways that you can think about that type of sentence. I think about things like, I am knowledgeable, but I also know nothing at the same time, right? I feel that way quite often about a lot of things. It's like, I know the truth, but I can't possibly understand the full truth at the same time, right? It's like I am a part of this world. I am part of this physical 3D reality, and I am participating within this life that I am living. And that is one part of me, but there's another separate part of each and every one of us that is eternal, right? That solar part of us, the soul part of us, or something that is a greater part. Like I am a one individual, but the one is part of the many at the same time. These are the type of things that Mercury and Gemini like to play with, right? We like to play with light and dark. We like to play with masculine and feminine. Think about how Gemini is one of the mutable signs that starts to shift that handover of light. So if you think about the solar year and the solar story as it moves through the zodiac, in the sign of Aries, sun comes back into dominance, right? And the sun and the light is increasing according to the solar story. You can see it from the northern hemisphere perspective. By the time we get to the sign of Cancer, which in the northern hemisphere is the middle of summer, you start to slowly lose light, right? We're going to have the summer solstice coming up here, which is the sun ingressing into the sign of Cancer. And although our days are still long, very slowly you start to begin to lose light if you live in the northern hemisphere and have that privilege of having that perspective, like physically. Symbolically, it doesn't matter where you live, northern or southern hemisphere. So Gemini is the sign that comes right before the light starts to wane, right? And the dark slowly starts to creep in. So it facilitates that handover. Mercury's other sign of Virgo facilitates a handover from the light half of the year to the dark half of the year. So Gemini facilitates the handover from light gaining to light losing, right? So it's that playing with the light and the dark at the same time, and how those two things are interacting at the same time. You don't necessarily notice the minutes starting to slip away right away, right? Until you get a little further into the summer. Usually not until you get further into like the Leo season, if you live in the northern hemisphere. So these oppositions, these two things that exist at once, right? The light and the dark, they exist at the same time, but they are fluctuating. They are ever moving. They are ever changing. Within that masculine and feminine energy of the light and the dark, because you have both parts there, even though this is a masculine sign, we are bringing in more information and really wanting to understand it in certain ways. Now, we're so interested in bringing in so much information in the sign of Gemini sometimes that maybe things don't hold our attention for a real long period of time, right? It seems like maybe we jump from one thing to another. Maybe there's some extra excitement here with Uranus being here, even more so than we already get in the sign of Gemini. So we may be comparing and contrasting two different things, looking to explore something new, mentally, conversationally, looking at new thought processes, looking at new ways of communicating with ourselves, looking at new habits and new processes that you are going to institute. They might feel really exciting. They might feel really liberating with Uranus here. The other possibility is that as this lunar cycle unfolds, it may really kind of show you a little glimpse of what Uranus is going to do in the sign of Gemini within your life over the next 7 years here. At the time of this new moon that is coming through in Gemini, Venus has several aspects that we're going to talk about here this week. They're all applying, so they're all strengthening, right? Because all of the aspects hit their exact moment after the new moon comes through. So the Venus aspects are cultivating a space to create change and take a different approach, because the planets that Venus is interacting with. Venus is going to interact with Uranus. She's going to interact with Neptune. She's going to interact with Pluto. So she's interacting with the outer planets, these slow-moving and these thematic building planets that often can bring change. And, quite honestly, they have all shifted signs quite recently. They're all in the early degrees of signs, right? Pluto's at 5 degrees of Aquarius. Neptune's at like 4 Aries. And then we have Gemini, Uranus at 2 degrees. So they're all bringing in fresh new energy still as far as the longevity of the stay that they have here. So taking a different approach and bringing some sort of change is something that Gemini is no stranger to, but with the interactions that we have, it's kind of amplifying that in a certain way. So maybe there's some sort of change or some sort of approach that you've wanted to take, but maybe have felt limited in some sort of way, and then we're able to grow from that. The Venus aspects seem to grow in intensity throughout the week here. We go from a sextile to a trine to an opposition. So there's this building process that begins here with the new moon at the beginning of this week here. So really cool, interesting, and curious new moon that we have coming through here at 24 degrees of Gemini on Sunday. So that's where we start out the beginning of the week. And then if we go ahead and move forward into Monday, June 15th, we're going to talk a whole lot about Venus here this week. Last week we talked about Venus moving into the sign of Leo. She's in the fiery place of the sun, right? There is so much about authenticity and really wanting to lead from the heart, really wanting to feel into our heart space and be authentic from the space that we can feel from within us, right? And really wanting to let our light shine outward. Sometimes there is what I believe to be a bit of a misconception that, or I guess it could be a shadow side of Leo, that Leo really just wants its own light to shine, but not others, right? In its truest and maybe most positive form, again, that could be a shadow side, in its most positive form, Leo really wants everybody's light to shine, right? So you can think about, and this is another little bit of a paradoxical thing, and paradoxes are part of Gemini. The sun, when it comes out, you can't see the other planets, right? You might be able to see the moon depending on what phase it is or where it's at in the sky potentially, but you can't see the other planets during the daytime once the sun comes out. So the sun does outshine in a certain way. However, when that sun rises and comes up, there's so much on the earth that you couldn't see before, right? There's light for us to be able to move about and to be able to navigate and whatnot. There's lots of movement and motions at nighttime, of course, but especially for us as humans, like during the daytime, that's our living period, right? For the most part. So there's that way in which the sun, the ruler of Leo, so you can see that quality in the sign of Leo, it really wants its light to shine, and that light is going to shine from within, but in its most positive form, it's still allowing the light to shine on others and to be able to put a spotlight on the other things that are around too. So not being self-centered, not being sacrificing of others and whatnot. So that's the most positive form that we could have of that solar light quality in the sign of Leo. This is a space where Venus has found herself. So we are finding that our desires are coming from our heart space. We're finding things that are within us that we really just need to be able to let it out, and we need to be able to let our light shine in some sort of way here. When Venus comes into the sextile with Uranus here, there is a bold and courageous curiosity that can come through here. There's an inventive connection that can come through, right? This is right off of the new moon here. So the new moon in the sign where Gemini is, and we're experiencing new things, we're exploring new things, maybe we're revolutionizing, and we're starting to see the shifts and the changes where Gemini falls into our chart. Look at what house Gemini is if you know your birth chart a little bit. I'm wondering about this inventive connection having something to do with reinventing the self, because this is the place of the sun, right? And the sun representing our identity, or that solar, unchanging part of us. The moon represents things like the body, our mind, our emotions, things that can shift pretty quickly. The sun is a little bit more consistent. It's more about the solar path. It's more about the soul path and things that are a little bit more consistent and not maybe quite so shifty. Electrifying ideas around Venus and Venusian things, pleasure, desire, relationships, and our overall enjoyment and connection. Again, wanting to lead from the heart with Venus in the sign of Leo, and then finding different ways to be able to do that. I have this little light that I really want it to be able to shine, right? But I haven't been able to. So let me brainstorm Gemini, Mercury, right? Mercury, the mental sphere. Let me think of different ways, different patterns, different processes, different habits that I can take. What are different routines that I can institute here, right? Things that might really, even if they're just really small little things, that might really revolutionize your day in some sort of way, or feel like it breaks something open in some sort of way. Sextiles are subtle, but Venus has a lot of activity going on this week. And I think with Uranus being in Gemini where that new moon is, it's amplifying that energy here, because this is coming just off of that. Again, these aspects are all in the applying phase, so they're built into this lunar cycle as well. A lot of Venusian activity. This aspect feels like the initiator of all of that. And when I think about Uranus being the awakener, being the one that is like waking up Venus, I really love that, right? It's like Venus has moved from the watery emotional sign of Cancer, where we're really feeling into things, the place of the moon, the place of emotions, the place of processing, the place of comfort, nurturing, and feeling held, feeling like we have a place that we can grow from, into the sign of Leo, where that growth really wants to be seen, right? So the interaction with Uranus just days after Venus moves into the sign of Leo feels like Uranus is knocking at the Venusian door, being like, hey, you're in the sign of Leo now, it's time to shine bright like the sun, right? So what can you bring forward in the sign of Leo in your chart? Here, this sextile may really kind of jumpstart that in a certain kind of way. So there we are on Monday. If we go ahead and move forward into Tuesday, June 16th, Venus is going to move from that sextile with Uranus into a trine with Neptune. I'm going to go ahead and put the chart up here so that way you all can see the way that this moves here. So this is the chart at the time of the new moon here. So you can see the new moon in the sign of Gemini in the 6th house here at 24 degrees of Gemini. And then if I go ahead and just move this forward a day here, and then some hours to get Venus to the 2nd degree here, you'll see that Venus makes that sextile to Uranus. So Venus in the 5th house in the sign of Leo, sextiling Uranus in the 3rd house in the sign of Gemini. When you're looking at houses on this chart, do not put the significations of the houses into the delineations, because this is just specific to my location, okay? So we're just using the houses as just a place of identifying. If you're not sure which house is which, if you see on the inner circle there's a circle and then there's numbers around it, those are indicating the houses. The first house starts on the left-hand side in the middle there, or on the eastern horizon. So just to kind of point that out for those of us that are not used to seeing the chart. And then if I go ahead and move this forward another day here, Venus is moving along, and we're gonna, again, back it forward, move it forward some hours here until Venus makes her way to the 4th degree here. All right, so here we are coming through on Tuesday when Venus makes this trine to Neptune. So much inspiration, so much inspiration. This is a fire trine, right? Fire is intimate, it is passionate, it is inspirational. It really wants to feel into it. It wants to fuel like a fire, right? Think about how fire consumes things to allow itself to shine brighter and to get bigger. Fire signs are passionate, they're motivated, they really want to inspire, bring things in, they want to light things up, right? It's fire. They want to move forward, they want to create, again, bringing more fuel in to be able to move forward and to be able to create. True, authentic creations can come through when Venus and Neptune are trining each other from fire signs here. Fire signs are very authentic within their own nature, and Venus and Neptune coming together are very creative, very romantically creative, right? So we may feel very, very inspired, and there might be the level of rose-colored glasses that can come through there. Things are not always as they appear with Neptune, but if we don't take the leap, if we don't take the chance, sometimes we don't know. There is a need to stay grounded, right? There always is a need to stay grounded, but this week specifically, Venus could really just kind of have so much going on that it's hard to keep your feet on the ground, right? Because she's coming through the interaction with Uranus. That's really going to light her up in a way that allows her to move more freely in ways that she hasn't before. She's coming into contact with Neptune, which is inspiring and has her wanting to move towards something that she feels very deeply connected to. But again, Neptune isn't always as it appears, and fire can move really, really quickly. So you can add wood to a fire to keep yourself warm and to be able to feed yourself. But if you add too much, you're going to end up with a forest fire, right? So there's a fine line there with fire. And when I think about the signs, when I think about fire, like I said, fire is very independent within its own space. It's very much wanting to create what it's wanting to create and do that in a very authentic way. But I think Aries and Leo might even be a little more specifically that way than Sagittarius. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, so it may consider a little bit more, where we have Leo ruled by the sun, we have Aries, which is ruled by Mars, right? So they're much more of like the singular or the separation principle here, or, you know, like looking at one specific thing, where Jupiter is much more unifying, bringing much more things together here. So really that independent factor and wanting to create things from a true authentic heart space is built into this aspect here. The space to be able to go your own way and really be able to stand for whatever it is that was in your heart, right? Venus in Leo wants to express herself. Uranus says, hey, you're in Leo, let's go ahead and shine, right? Maybe you went through this watery space where you've been feeling into your emotions, and it's still good to have those emotions, but how can you move forward with that? How can you now stand nice and tall? Not that Venus in Cancer is always like a wet blanket, but it can be very, we can feel like we want to be coddled, right? We want to feel nurtured. We want to feel loved. We want to feel cared for. And that's the space of Cancer. The space of Leo is much more about standing up high, standing up tall, right? And presenting yourself in a certain type of way. So having the pride or the strength to express what is within your heart space may be coming through here. Venus and Neptune can be a little bit emotionally driven between the two of them. So emotionally driven passions or just things that you feel deeply connected to. Very artistic expressions can come through here. It can be very creative and just wanting to bring different things together in a certain type of way to create and to be able to move forward and to be able to show what we've brought forward here with pride and with strength and with expression. So very cool aspects with Venus coming through here this week. If we move on back to Wednesday here, June 17th, again, we just keep interacting with Venus here. So the moon is going to move from the sign of Cancer into the sign of Leo. Venus is going to make an opposition to Pluto this day. I'm going to go ahead and put the chart up here because I want you all to see that we have a moment here where the moon is going to be sitting with Venus and opposing Pluto at the same time here. So this is fairly close to the time. The moon is going to conjoin Pluto at about 4:29 p.m. Eastern time. Again, translate to your own time zone, and the timing even might be just slightly different depending on your own location here. So we have Pluto sitting at 5 degrees 7 minutes of Aquarius, sitting in the 5th house of this chart, and it's directly opposing the moon here, right? Notice that Venus and the moon are sitting directly together there at 7 degrees. They conjoined just a couple minutes before that at 6 degrees. So they're moving, or 6 minutes to 7 minutes. We're splitting hairs here. But the point is just to show that the moon acts as an amplifier. It acts as an activator, and it really weaves in the environmental story of the archetype, right? So what does that mean? It's situational. It brings things down to our environment, right? It weaves the story. So Wednesday afternoon, like 4:30 p.m. Eastern time, may feel like a very powerful moment for some of us. When Venus and Pluto get together, there is a magnetic attraction that can come forward here. In the opposition, there can be a little bit of tension. It's a tug and pull, right? It's pulling together, but it can also be pushing apart. So again, we're looking at the dualities and the polarities. What is the similarities, but what are the differences? Where do things come together, but where do they push against? This is another way for us to consider the oppositions here, which we started out with the Gemini New Moon coming through here. With Venus being the planet that represents love, relationships, and the way that we harmonize throughout our lives, deep explorations of different relationships may be coming through here. Enjoyment and pleasure exploration as well on many, many different levels. Venus in Leo says, I need to be fulfilled completely, right? I need to be honored. I need to be recognized. Again, that light from within shining forward. The opposition brings that tension or the tug and pull. So if we feel supported within our environment and with others, then the connections can deepen intensely here, right? You have that magnetic attraction that can come through. If there are doubts, if there are fears, if there are questions of loyalty, from ourselves or from others, that may have to be faced here as this aspect comes through. Suspicion, jealousy, they are all possible when Venus and Pluto come together. Sometimes things can be acted out upon explosively, very, very quickly. Things can shift, things can change when Venus and Pluto are coming together. When I think about the axis that this opposition is happening across, Leo-Aquarius axis, there's so much of that me versus them, right? We're looking at the sun versus Saturn. We're looking at letting our light shine in our identity versus overarching systems. And it's an air sign, so it's more of the social systems, right? There's a lot of social concern in the sign of Aquarius. There is humanitarian, right? There are aspects in the sign of Aquarius here. So the singular individual versus the group, right? That could be coming up for us. Power dynamics occur within Venus-Pluto, but power dynamics also occur when we're looking at the Leo-Aquarius axis. And it's worth noting that our eclipses are shifting to this axis as well. So the opposition and the polarization between Leo and Aquarius have a growing emphasis that's going to be occurring more throughout the summer as the nodes move from Pisces, Virgo into Leo, Aquarius, and then we get more eclipses across this aspect too. So it's just houses and signs that are already being lit up and going to be having some longevity and a bit more of a story to unfold over the next couple years for all of us. So those power dynamics are showing up in multiple ways and may be intensifying, right? This might be kind of leading into that story. Jupiter's going to move into the sign of Leo. Jupiter's going to oppose Pluto as well, right? So Venus may be kind of priming us for some of these other aspects that are going to be coming forward here. Now, a lot of this sounds difficult. A lot of this sounds fearful, right? A lot of this feels like the doubt and suspicion. Magnetic attraction, things coming together, that all sounds great, but it also sounds very, very intense at the same time. There's a lot of intensity with Pluto. The ability to find a deep strength from within our own heart space is also something that is there. When you think about Venus and Leo, you have leading from the heart space, right? Wanting to be authentic. When you have Pluto interacting with any sort of planet, there is a deep power, there is a strength that can come to us, but it comes from deep within. It comes from down underground. It comes from the subterranean level. It comes from a strength that we didn't quite know we had, or one that we had to grow, or one that we had to cultivate through some sort of lived experience, right? This could be the moon coming through here at the same time and bringing it down to the physical world and the environment. Standing for ourselves and our own agency and ability is definitely a possibility as these two planets are coming through here, or at least the theme of that present, right? Like, am I able to stand for myself, or do I feel empowered and be able to empower myself and stand up tall and strong, or do I feel like somebody else is empowered and I'm being oppressed in some sort of way? That's the tension of the opposition, where it can go both ways here. While we have this aspect going on, Uranus is coming into the square with the lunar nodes here. So we've talked a little bit about this in our weekly meditations, as well as alluded to it a bit in our past weekly videos here. But Uranus is going to move to the 3rd degree here on this day, on Wednesday, which is making a square to the lunar nodes, which are at 3 degrees of Pisces and Virgo. We're going to have them at the same degree until June 22nd. Now, this is an energy that has been building and has been crescendoing, so you may already kind of feel it. When you have a square to the nodes of the moon from any planet, you have this karmic pressure point that can come through, right? If you think about the nodes being tension points, right? Places of fluctuation within our lives. Think about the places where the eclipses are happening. There are events that are unfolding that feel like they're out of our control. There's aspects that feel like we're able to move forward towards things. There's things that feel like they're releasing all at the same time. This is, again, that opposition. The nodes are always in opposition to each other. So there's a tension, and there's a karmic level to the nodes because of the longevity that they have. When I think of Uranus squaring the lunar nodes, I think about an awakening of our awareness to where we have been and where we're going, right? What the South Node is asking us to release and reflect on where we've been, and where the North Node is pulling us. What is inviting us? Where is the curiosity that has been intriguing us in some sort of way? What do we feel pulled to that might be something that's a little bit different than our lived experiences that we've already had? Really feeling the need to break from the mold and do something different here, right? With the nodes in earthly Virgo and watery Pisces, it may have to deal with reality versus fantasy, right? Being within the physical world, but knowing that there is something that is well beyond that. Knowing that we can be moving towards the light, Pisces moving towards Aries, right, where light takes over, but we can also be moving towards the dark at the same time, right? These things can be happening simultaneously. Again, Virgo is the sign that comes before Libra, which takes us into the dark half of the year. So you have the nodes are in this place where they're always exploring oppositions, but they're exploring the oppositions of moving into light and moving into dark, right? I've often thought of Virgo as like the sign where if you feel yourself on the ground, like feet on the earth, right? And there's a big hole in front of you where you can just see down into the earth, and you are fully within the sun and you are within the material world, but you can see that there is so many more layers below, right? Now, we don't normally see holes that are like that, but just bear with me and think about it for a moment. Where Pisces is more like looking up into the sky, right? Looking up into the night sky and seeing all of these little lights and dreaming and thinking about what could be there, you know, what these little lights could be, and seeing the images of the constellations and things like that, right? So you have that like peering down into, and then that like looking up and peering up into at the same time. Hopefully that makes sense and serves you well in some sort of way here. So this can really feel like pressure with both of these aspects happening here at the same time. Again, there's longevity to Uranus squaring the lunar nodes. Those actions that you feel like you have to take that are wrapping up the eclipse cycle of whatever has been happening for you with these eclipses in Pisces and Virgo, it might really feel like we're trying to tie up loose ends, right? Uranus might really put the pressure down on us in some sort of way here. So that's what we got coming through on Wednesday. This is the majority of our aspects for the week here. We're looking at Venus really getting lit up and really just having these openings in some sort of way. She's opening, she's revolutionizing, she's moving forward. With Pluto, it can be empowering, it can be revolutionary, it can have us moving forward, right? Feel like we're building up and up and up. A lot of times that comes from having to look deep down within in some sort of way. So looking at shadow material, looking at, you know, what has worked and what hasn't worked, looking at our own limitations, looking at, you know, maybe our own shadows in some sort of way. I could see that with Venus and Pluto, especially with Venus in the sign of Leo. Like, what are my own shadows of my own sun, right? What are the spaces that I am lacking in, and I can learn from that and be able to move forward in some sort of mature type of way. Again, the new moon in the sign of Gemini there, bringing in new ideas and new thought processes, might give you some leeway of like, okay, this is the direction that I've been trying to go and I felt stuck, but now I have some new tools, resources, I've brainstormed, I've had messages and maybe some sort of download or enlightenment of some kind that has come through where you really understand this is the way that I need to go, or where the limitations were, right? Maybe they were self-imposed in some sort of way, and you can move forward from them. Interesting things here this week. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna follow the moon around here for the rest of the week here. So that is Wednesday, June 17th, moving forward into June 18th, and we have the moon in the sign of Leo all day. It's going to square Mars, but it's continuing that Leo energy here this week. That Leo moon is going to take us right into Friday, June 19th, before the moon moves into the sign of Virgo, 10:37 a.m. Eastern time. Again, translate to your own time zone. It's going to square Uranus, and it's going to conjoin the South Node here too. Those interactions to Uranus and the South Node will potentially kind of activate that nodal square that we have. So you might feel a little bit more of that tension coming through here Friday. And then we move forward into Saturday, June 20th, where that Virgo moon is going to take us into the full day, and there's no major lunar aspects. When we have a more quiet Saturday, the last day of the week, the way that we have the schedule laid out through time here in this 3D world, it feels like a rest moment. It feels like a space of pausing, right? When I say no major lunar aspects, I'm looking at the squares, the oppositions, and the conjunctions. So some of the more minor aspects may be happening, but I'm not necessarily looking at them here because they're not quite as loud. We'll talk about this on next week's video, but then as we move forward into Sunday the 21st, the sun's gonna move into the sign of Cancer. So we're gonna get that summer solstice moment. So before that intimate turning point moment, that very symbolic moment that tethers our astrological wheel, we'll talk more about that next week, we have this moment of pausing, of resting, while there's all kinds of other things going on, because the wheel never stops, right? It's never really at rest, but maybe a moment where you can pause and take a breath coming through here at the end of the week, because really there might be quite a bit to process of what Venus has went through here this week. There might be a lot of openings, there might be a lot of new exciting, a lot of curious things that come through here, but there comes a point where you take all that up and up and up, and then you have to really bring it down and reflect on it and put it into some sort of motion, right? Brainstorming and ideas and coming up with things and having conversations and being excited about things are all good and dandy, but if you don't actually put that into motion, then that's another story. I see the possibility of putting things into motion through this lunar cycle, because when we come to the full moon here, and we'll talk about that when it gets closer, Mars is going to be sitting awfully close to Uranus in the sign of Gemini. I think it's at like 1 degree. So it moved into the sign of Gemini like the day before the full moon or something like that. So that action and that drive to be able to take those ideas and move forward here at the culminating moment of the lunar cycle is built into it. So, maybe this will be really productive for some people. Maybe it'll be really opening and really, really inspiring for some people. I hope it is for you. I hope it's wonderful. I hope it's great. I hope this message serves you well, and I hope that you feel connected to whatever it is that you are hoping to feel connected to here this week. All right, that is what we have for this week. I will say that there is no meditation this week due to some education that I am doing. We have a couple weeks here where we are not having one. If you find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Meditative Astrology, that's where you'll see all the announcements of the timing. So it's a little bit shaky here through the end of June with timing, just because I have a multitude of things going on. Seems like since Uranus has entered Gemini, there's just been a ton that is going on. Yeah, we will get back to our more regular schedule in July. After the 4th of July holiday comes through here in the United States. So again, thank you for sticking through this video. If you have made it all the way through and you haven't already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit subscribe so that way we can walk this astrological journey together and move through each week. I look forward to seeing you at live meditation, and I look forward to seeing you here next week. Reach out if you have any questions, comments, or any suggestions of any kind. Meditativeastrology.com is the hub for all of the things, including readings. So take care, have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.